Now that you know how to do a walk cycle, it's time for you to create your own cartoon characters. And then once you have a character created, you're going to do what's called a turnaround. A turnaround shows the character looking in all different directions. Profile view, 3/4 view, facing straight towards you, facing straight away from you. If you put them all together and you animate them, you'll see the character spinning around. I was able to do that with a wooden mannequin, and I was also able to create this very rudimentary cartoon just to show you the process. I'll have both in my blog, and you can use them as templates to create your own unique characters. I deliberately made my character as plain as possible because I knew you'd want to create your own unique character. What I'm going to do here is I pulled in the mannequin into Photoshop and I made it as transparent as possible. I unlocked the layer and slid the opacity so that it's almost not visible at all. And then I created another layer on top of it, and that's the layer that I'm tracing in. I'm using the Wacom tablet. I'm just using a black and the paintbrush tool. I'm making thick, bold lines, and I'm just tracing over the outside edge of the mannequin just to create a human form. Again, you're going to probably want to go into more detail and create a more unique character. I'm just doing this as a quick sample to show you, and also with the idea of creating a template that you guys can use to create something even more creative and unique. Make sure all your lines are closed. When you draw the hands, angle in at the wrist and then out again for the hands. When you do the heads, make sure that everything lines up. The eyes line up, the noses line up, the mouths line up, the ears line up. Try and be consistent throughout all the different mannequins. You notice that the person facing away, you don't see the face at all. There's the profile view, the 3/4 view. I have worksheets in my blog that will show you how to do all that. Then you're going to go back and forth between the figures, fixing them for consistency. Try and make sure all your lines are closed so that later on you have an image that's filled with white. It's a lot easier to play around with it, stacking it and making sure that it animates if you don't just have lines, if you have a color on the inside. So it's a lot easier to fill your artwork with color if you close all your lines, because we can then just use a magic wand and remove the color from the background. So just go through your people, fix anything that looks wrong, make sure they're consistent. And now what I'm doing is I just saved it as a JPEG, and I'm using the magic wand to get rid of the background. And I can see that in most of my figures there are gaps, and that's why the magic wand is taking the color out of the inside of the figure too. So I'm just closing all those gaps, and I'm filling the figures with the white color of the paper, just going through each one and finding all the little gaps. If you use thick, bold lines, it shouldn't be that hard or take you too long. And once you've gotten rid of all the color in the background and all the figures in your turnaround are filled with just a plain white, you can start cutting them out and stacking them. I'm just going to use the lasso tool, and I'm going to cut them out one by one. I'm creating a new file, which is going to be, I think I settled on 8 by 10, and I'm going to just use the lasso tool, cut out my first figure, put them right in the middle. I've removed the background color, so there's a clear background, and I'm just stacking the figures on top of each other. This is your chance to see if they really match up. Are the heads the same size? Do they line up? Do they line up at the feet? Is one figure too wide, too narrow? You can always click Edit, Transform, and then Scale. Or in my case, some of my figures were tilted, so I did Edit, Transform, Rotate to make sure they all line up for each other. It's basically the same thing that you did when you stacked your other figures in past assignments. You did it for your walk cycle and for your other animations. So once you've made sure that all your figures line up and they're stacked, you're going to go up to the window at the top, click on that, and make sure your timeline is visible. And then you're going to create frames from layers, and you can play your timeline, and you'll see inconsistencies. Something's too big, something's too wide. It doesn't really look like it's spinning. You stop, you go to each frame, you adjust it. You can delete your slides from your timeline over and over again and just create frames from, you can create frames, animation frames from your timeline anytime you want. So you can delete them and recreate them. I ended up going from frame to frame in my timeline and checking each figure against the one before it and the one after it and making sure they were really the right size and really lined up. It took me a while to get it, so I was very satisfied that it really looked like a single object that was spinning in space. Once you have that stack, you're going to want to make all your frames visible, and you're going to want to save that layered document as a Photoshop document, because you're going to export those frames later to Adobe Animate. However, you may also want to make a GIF. So once you have your timeline set and it really looks like a spinning object with only one view visible in each frame, you may want to export it and create a GIF. So what you would do in that case is you would go File, Export, and then the choice that you're going to pick is Save for Web. So when you click on that, it'll give you the option to make a GIF. And GIFs are really fun, little moving cartoons. You see them on websites, you see them on social media, people email them to one another. They even send them as text. So there I am exporting it, save for web. And this is quite a big document. You're going to want to shrink it in this case. So what I ended up doing was see, it's too big. I ended up shrinking it down to 25%. First I tried 12%, that was too small. Then I went 25%, and that was just right, as long as you can see the entire person in the frame. And then you hit save, and then in just a minute I'm going to open up my GIF, and you can watch it spin. It looks really cool. And you'll see this spinning GIF on my blog post. I'll put it up there. When you export it, you want it as HTML and image, both. Okay? Make sure you don't save it as image only. It needs to be saved as HTML too, otherwise it won't spin. So there we go. There's my GIF. Now, once you have these perfectly stacked images, think about that template sheet that I had before. It's not really accurate anymore, is it? Now that I've figured out how to really match up my figures. So I'm going to actually create a brand new template sheet. I ended up starting out with an 11 by 14 sheet, and I just lined all the figures up. And this is now my very accurate turnaround template that I can use when I create other figures. I didn't want to give you a finished cartoon character, and I didn't want to download one from the web because, again, we don't want to be copying copyrighted cartoon characters. We want to be creating our own. So I know nobody would possibly want to copy this one. He basically doesn't have very much detail at all. He doesn't even have hair or clothing. But having it as a template underneath, especially if you dim it out by changing the opacity, will help you to figure out the direction of everything. Then later on, you see I went ahead and created a more detailed cartoon character. In my other video, I showed everybody how to color them. This is Rachel Winneberg, the Helpful Art Teacher. Happy animating!